That's true. Listen up. I know firsthand how limited a vessel medical insurance can be. This is why you need reliable medical coverage. Moore Dixon offers comprehensive global insurance tailored for yachties, covering everything from emergencies to routine checkups with flexible options and a single point of contact. Moore Dixon has been voted best health and medical insurance by captains and crew, including myself. Don't wait until the unexpected happens. Get covered today. Visit mdbl.im or email them at inquiries@mdbl.im for a free quote. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Uncensored. I'm your host, Maria from Yachts Mermaids, and today we're diving into episode 2 of a powerful 3-part conversation with maritime attorney Adria Notari. Adria is a former captain and former U.S. Navy Reserve lieutenant, bringing a rare, invaluable combination of seafaring experience and legal expertise to this conversation. In this episode, we explore contracts, wrongful termination, and retaliation, and what your options are, even if you don't have a contract. We also talk about what to do if you report abuse on board and don't receive support from your employer, and how litigation can be a powerful tool to change laws and shape the future of the maritime industry. If you missed part 1, don't forget to watch it as it covers your basic rights at sea. The link is in the description below. Let's dive in. So I want to start this episode and conversation with you with a real story of a female crew member who contacted me about a year ago in regards of a sexual assault that happened to her on board by a crew member. And we followed protocol and all the procedures that are meant to be followed in cases like this. She contacted Port Authority. She filed a police report. We contacted the captain who basically came back and said, how much money do you want to keep her silent? Then we contacted management. We contacted Flag State. We ended up trying to contact MLC and Nautilus International and Jack Crew Help and, everybody and anyone that we could think of that we should contact in this case. And after 2 weeks of trauma and this person not being able to sleep, eat, basically everybody said, hey, sign the NDA that they're giving you, take the 3,000 euros and go home. So she spoke up about the abuse. The retaliation was that she lost her job and she was, intended to keep silent. And the perpetrator was kept on board. So these are stories that are horrendous, but also more common than not in the industry, in the maritime industry. So my question is, we have all these guidelines set by the organizations of the maritime industry, but it doesn't seem like anybody really follows them or anybody is held accountable to follow them. It just seems that it's kind of up to the social responsibility of each individual and company to potentially use the guidelines and follow them and do the right thing. So as a lawyer, when you hear this, what are your thoughts?
Unfortunately, those situations happen a lot, and it's disturbing. It's unacceptable. So I personally think that we need more legislation, passage of laws. But most importantly, I think that we need litigation, because once you hire an attorney and you litigate these things, you get rid of that culture that tends to sweep these things under the rug. The things that you mentioned, the NDA, here's 3,000 euros, and now nobody talks about it as if it never happened. We bury our heads in the sand. So that's why litigation is so important, because you bring all these things to light. So you file papers where all of this is put in like black and white, all these horrible things that are happening, the assault, the cover-up following the assault, the attempt to silence these victims and survivors after the assault. So it's just a chain of bad things that are happening. And then the reaction to just silence everyone, that's unacceptable, because then what happens? We just have a vicious cycle, and this scourge in the industry continues. We never see an end to it. So what can we do? I definitely recommend that yacht crew do inform port state control and do inform the authorities. In your situation, you said that this woman in France, filed a police report. She went to the police. So definitely notify the authorities. But when you don't get any relief or any response from them, by all means, contact a lawyer. Contact the lawyer. And the lawyer will let you know what your legal rights are. And sometimes those NDAs are not going to be enforceable. They're just intimidation tactics to continue to try to silence these women or these victims. And if you get an attorney to advise you about, maybe an NDA is not going to be enforceable anyway. So who cares? Don't let that silence you. But if people don't know that that you can fight the enforceability of an NDA in certain situations, they just accept it, and then this scourge continues. So I think that litigation, hiring lawyers to, put these things out there when sexual assault happens, or sexual harassment, or an unsafe condition, or somebody was working on a yacht for 6 months and not getting paid, or, whatever the situation is, we shouldn't be silent about it and, just hope that it's going to go away, because it's not. So with litigation, you bring these things out into the open, people start talking about it, you raise an awareness, and raising awareness sometimes leads to legislation, and so the litigation and the legislation, in my mind, can lead to change, because that's what we need. We need change.
Absolutely. No, I agree. And I think that's the biggest issue we have in the maritime industry, that there's not enough litigation happening, because victims are not, for whatever reason, many different reasons, I should say, are not willing to do the litigation. And I think we do need more of those courageous victims, survivors, to come forward and say, hey, this happened to me. How can we potentially create change from this, legally? And then also you say, it's advisable to reach out a lawyer. But my question about that would be, if I'm as an African crew member in a foreign flag vessel in a port that's not my hometown, who do I call? Do I call a lawyer that's in the port where my incident happened? Do I call a lawyer from my country? Do I call a lawyer from the flag that the vessel is flying? Or do I have to call all of them?
Well, if you know a trusted attorney, then by all means, call that person first. But it doesn't have to be an attorney in your country or in the country of the flag state of the vessel. And I'll speak about myself. I don't know, but I'm licensed to practice in the United States. I live in the United States, but most of my clients are not from the United States. Most of my clients are from Europe, Asia, Africa, the Caribbean. Very few of my clients are actually U.S. citizens. And very few of my clients work on U.S. flag vessels. Most of my clients work on these foreign flag and flag of convenience vessels. And it's perfectly fine. Thanks to smartphones, people can contact me all over the world, no matter where they are. With a smartphone, they can speak to me. I give my clients my cell phone number.
But if you are wanting to go the lawyer route, who has jurisdiction? If you're going to litigate about something, right? Where would you take the company or the employer to court? Or I don't know or the management company, whoever is in charge of you, right? On board. What's the jurisdiction? Because that's where a lot of confusion is. Is it my country? Is it where it happened? What happens if it's international waters and there's no jurisdiction? Is it the flag state country, or is it a mix?
Okay, so that's a very complicated question. But a yacht crew member doesn't have to have a law degree. A yacht crew member doesn't have to be a lawyer. The only thing a yacht crew member has to know that, hey, I was just assaulted or injured on this vessel and I have rights. That's not supposed to happen to me. And they should contact someone. The lawyer that the yacht crew contacts might not be the adequate lawyer for this type of case. But for example, if that happens to me and I receive a call, but I can't help in that situation, I might refer that case to another lawyer or I might help the yacht crew member contact a lawyer in the appropriate jurisdiction. Now, but these jurisdictional arguments, these are very complicated, fact-intensive analysis that's involved. And like even sometimes lawyers and judges scratch their heads about this to try to figure out like which is the proper country or jurisdiction, what law are we going to apply? I don't think a crew member has to worry about that. There's no obligation for a crew member to worry about that. But having said that, there are many situations where the most important thing for jurisdiction is where is the base of operations of this yacht business or this charter business, or where's the base of operations? We all know that many companies have shell companies in other countries, like let's say the Marshall Islands, for example. Even though they have absolutely no business in the Marshall Islands, they have no offices there, they have no employees there. It's a taxation strategy, and that's fine. Taxation or no taxation has nothing to do with crew members' rights. Okay, so those are two separate things. I don't care about shell corporations. I don't care about taxation. If something happens to a crew member, they're entitled to the medical care. They're entitled to compensation for whatever happened to them, and they've got a valid claim. They're entitled to be paid on time, their wages. So all of these things, right? The flag state. We know that flag of convenience is not a new thing. It's been around for decades. So what do we mean by flag of convenience? That a vessel that's, home ported in, let's say in the United States, has a different flag that's not from the United States, probably some country that the vessel never even operates in. Those are flag of convenience. The crew member doesn't have to, at that moment that the crew member says, oh boy, something bad happened to me, I think I need a lawyer. The crew member doesn't have to go through all this analysis and say, okay, wait, hold on. It's a shell company and the flag state is this and jurisdiction is that. That's all nonsense. Let the lawyers worry about that. So to contact the lawyer, any lawyer, and just get the wheels turning as quickly as possible so that your case can get into the right hands of someone that can help you, can find jurisdiction and all those things. So having said that, regardless of where the shell company is located, that's a fictitious thing because we know the base of operations is one of the most important factors. So if the vessel is based in the United States, home ported out of the United States, the crew signs on and signs off in the United States, they charter from the United States to either, the Caribbean or, whatever the case may be. But the shell company is in another country and the flag of convenience is in another country. It doesn't matter if there's enough evidence, if there are enough ties to the United States, then United States law will apply and the United States will have jurisdiction over the claim. Another thing that can be done is arresting vessels. Arresting vessels that's an additional remedy that's unique under maritime law. If you were in a car accident, you wouldn't be able to arrest someone's car. There's no equivalent like that on land. But let's say you're a crew member and you've been working 5 or 6 months and you haven't been paid and you haven't been paid and you haven't been paid. You've asked to be paid. You're getting the runaround. Your pay has not been brought up to date. You have a lien against the vessel. And a maritime attorney, especially on a yacht or something like that, where someone's trying to take advantage of you. You focus a lot on these smaller vessels where sometimes these bad things happen. And the proper maritime attorney can help the crew member arrest that vessel and get your wages paid. So
And about the arresting the vessel, because we hear a lot that you can do it on your own. Like you can go to port state and the port can help you, the port authority can help you do the arrest of the vessel, which is called the lien, right? Or I might be saying it wrong. The lien
is what the person has. So
okay, so do we need a lawyer to do that, or can we go a different route and get that vessel arrested?
in my experience, you need a lawyer, but I mean, I have read about situations where a yacht is in violation of MLC and port state control arrests the vessel. But that's, if they found that the vessel was in violation of some regulation or some guideline. But for a specific claim like that, like a crew member's wage claim or a crew member's assault claim, I've always seen a lawyer involved to work with the U.S. Marshals to arrest the vessel. So that's a very powerful thing I'm talking about also. So it doesn't matter if you've got a shell corporation in another country, that the flag state is in another country. If the vessel comes to the United States, a maritime attorney working together with the U.S. Marshals can have that vessel arrested in the United States. And then at that moment, it's like the U.S. court takes custody of the vessel at that time. The crew members have to get off. The boat can't move. The boat is seized until the claim gets resolved. And all of that. So that's why I encourage yacht crew members to don't get bogged down with these, different international concepts about the flag and, where the vessel was traveling at the time, what port it was in, the citizenship of the crew member, the citizenship of the shell company or the management company. Like none of that is going to stop the claim from being investigated.
Okay, so basically reach out to a lawyer that you trust, but if not, then reach out to a maritime lawyer nearby, maybe, because I feel like a lot of people just don't know who to reach out. Like, okay, there's a maritime law, but who do I reach out to? Like what type of, do I reach out to the one in my country or do I reach out to the one where I'm at? That's kind of like where I hear a lot of people asking, like, who do I reach out to when it comes to maritime law,
That's a valid question. So reach out to the attorney that you know. If you know a maritime attorney in your country, reach out to that person. If that person says, oh, no, I can't help you because, XYZ, then reach out to an attorney in the country that corresponds to the flag state of the vessel. But don't just be frozen and say like, oh, look at all these international factors. I can't do anything. No, that's not the solution. And if you don't know a maritime attorney, crew members can contact the ITF, and the ITF will see because the ITF is international.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the ITF because that's another thing. And this is where the whole private thing falls into place. This one crew member that just told me, hey, I'm not being paid. I was let go of the vessel. I was never paid my final wages. I have gone through, flag state, all the routes. She contacted ITF. She contacted Marshall Islands, which was a flag state. She contacted management. She contacted PYA. I mean, like we have contacted as many possible routes. And basically, Marshall Islands said, you're a private vessel. We can't do anything about it. ITF said the same thing. You're not a commercial vessel. We can't do anything about it. PYA said it's just a matter of waiting for hopefully your wages to come through. And then the crew member now is back home, out of money and having to work long hours and not be compensated for it. So, and then, maybe I know the wages, we hear a lot where I think her wages that were like 2,000 euros. And, it's not a lot, but for some people, it's a lot of money. And then some lawyers say, well, it's not worth going the litigation way for that amount of money. So, I mean, I know there's all this support for commercial, but somewhere along the line, it seems that it doesn't overlap with private. It seems like, oh, well, you're private. Sorry, you don't get all these benefits. It's insane.
Well, when you're saying commercial and private, what are you like? Maybe you can explain what you mean by
Well,
that.
that a private vessel doesn't have a commercial license, right? Like they don't have to follow certain things, like maybe like a container ship or a cruise ship, right? Like they are commercial vessels. They have to follow certain guidelines, but these private small pleasure boats, that's what they call them, private pleasure boats. They are non-commercial. And it seems that if you're under 500 ton, that's where you're at, unless you have a license, specifically for that then there's no benefits, or not benefits, that there's no rights for you because you're not commercial. And this is literally what these organizations and these flag states are telling us. So where do obviously we get discouraged because we're like, okay, we're going the right route. We're doing everything that we're meant to do to report this. And the result is you don't have rights.
Well, so if you're in a situation like that, where you're, like you said, you're following all of the protocols, you're contacting flag state, you're contacting the ITF. And if you're not getting any relief anywhere, people are slamming doors in your face, contact an attorney. So I don't want to give specific advice about that claim, or I don't want to give specific advice in general like this, but I'll give specific advice in a confidential setting. What if a client contacts me one-on-one? Because legal advice has to be confidential. But if doors are getting slammed in your face like that, no, it doesn't mean you have no remedy. No, you can always consult with an attorney and see what can be done. And I have had situations where crew members weren't getting paid, and we had to arrest the vessel until they got paid. Case is different. That's why I'm very reluctant to give generalized advice like that, because it's not always accurate. Each case has to have its own particular advice.
Absolutely. But I appreciate you, reminding us that just because we're being dismissed doesn't mean there's no solution. Like we can definitely reach out to a maritime lawyer and hopefully get some answers and results. And I think this is where real change happens, because through the law, we can hold accountable those who are not doing the right thing. So going back to contract, if a vessel doesn't want to give you a contract or doesn't give you a contract, even if you're asking for it, what are options? Leave the vessel? Is that the only option?
Technically it's not illegal not to have a contract, but it's a risk because then there are no parameters. So you don't know again, my number one question is always, who is your employer? Now, sometimes that's very clearly identified in the contract. But if you're taking a chance and working on a vessel with no employment contract, who's your employer? Do you know who your employer is? If something happens, where do you go? Who do you contact? You're powerless almost, but it's not, the Maritime Labor Convention says you have to have seafarer employment agreements. But I've seen situations where seafarers were working and there was no per se written contract. What am I going to do at that point? Am I going to contact the port state and report that? No, I'm going to represent that crew member, and I'm going to try to get them a maximum recovery under these basic rights that they're entitled to under the law. They're entitled to their wages. They're entitled to their medical care. They're entitled to a reasonably safe workplace. All of these things that we've been talking about.
Okay. So basically, know who you work for, have a contract. If they don't want to give you one, massive red flag, don't work on that vessel. But if you are already on the vessel, you don't have a contract, then you need to contact a lawyer, a maritime lawyer.
If something bad happens, you can, if something bad happens, you don't have to say, oh, well, I guess I can't do anything because I don't have a contract. That's wrong. So I never want the crew members to feel discouraged and be like, oh, well, I can't do anything. It's a foreign flag. Oh, well, I can't do anything. I don't have a contract. No, don't be discouraged. And with some creative lawyering, you can always find a solution and a remedy to enforce your seafarers' rights.
Exactly. Because whether you have a contract or not, some legal rights do apply. You just need somebody to support you with. And talking about contracts terminations. So we see a lot in the industry, specifically in the yachting industry, where you are terminated without a cause. Beyond terminating somebody but without a cause, there's a lot of retaliation termination. For example, that one young girl that got assaulted, reported it, did everything. Retaliation was her termination on board with the NDA. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like termination without a cause and retaliation, termination through retaliation for speaking up and reporting something that was wrong.
Okay, sure. The typical scenario that we see in crew member employment agreements are at-will employment. And that's what it's called, at will. And that basically means that it's the will of the employer or it's the will of the crew member. There's no obligation for the company to hire you again. That's what at-will employment means. They can rehire you if they want to, but we can't force them to rehire you. I can't force them to give you your job back. By the same token, it works both ways. The crew member can resign and say, you know what, this isn't for me. I want to go back home and, work on a farm, whatever. There's no obligation for the crew member to say, to complete their contract. So a lot of times we'll see that in the employment agreement. So it's at will. So the company or the employer can terminate the crew member for any reason without clause, but it can't be like discrimination. It can't be a discriminatory reason. It can't be retaliation. That crew member they were going to file a claim for the injury that they suffered and for the unseaworthiness of the vessel. So I'm going to fire that person. No, then that's illegal. That's unlawful retaliation. And so you can't do that. And you also can't retaliate against a crew member or the crew member reporting some unsafe situation on the vessel. So, this ladder, this windlass, this gangway, or whatever the case would be, or this crew member is dangerous and he's harassing all the women on board and he's inappropriate. And I reported that to HR or the management company, and now they're retaliating against me. That's also unlawful. So then for those situations, then yes, there are legal remedies. But typically that at-will situation, employment situation exists. And then another thing that I wanted to mention that we touched on briefly about the management companies. So the management companies are not your employer. Management companies have a contract with the employer. And so the employer delegates a lot of things to the management company, like to do the paperwork and the contracts and whatnot. But under the law, the employer is the one who actually carries that burden, that responsibility for the safe workplace, the medical care, and free from sexual assault, sexual harassment, all those things. The employer can't delegate those things.
Exactly. And a lot of the times it won't be, we tend to think that it's the principal of the vessel, but it's not the principal of the vessel as an individual. It's the company created, for the vessel to be registered by, right?
Well, it depends. Sometimes the owner of the vessel and your employer are two different entities or two different companies. It could happen. It happens a lot, actually.
Yeah.
So I might be working on a yacht that's owned by ABC Corporation, but the employer under my employment agreement is someone else. Like there's an owner and then there's an operator. That's why legally it's so important to know, who the owner is, what your job description is, but who's your employer?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's the big one. And okay, so that really clarifies a lot. And what about freelance workers, people that are doing temp jobs? We often see that people don't get those type of employees don't get any contracts a lot of the times. I encourage people to bring their own contracts and say, hey, you don't have one, that's fine, but here's one. Let's edit properly and then let's have it. Are there any protection for people that are temping, that are freelancing in the industry as seafarers?
yes, there are still protections like freelance workers or day workers. A lot of the yacht publications and industry journals talk about how the MLC requires even day workers and freelance workers to have an employment agreement. It's just up to the actual owner operators of the yacht to actually incorporate that into their business model and prepare these contracts. So it's going to be like a temporary working contract. But even if so you should have a contract. But even if there's not a contract, that's not an impediment to your legal rights and your protections under the law. Now, depending on how much or how little you contribute to the vessel, then you've got different rights under the maritime law. Maybe you won't qualify as a seafarer because you're not exactly a crew member. You don't live there permanently, live and sleep and work and eat on the vessel. Maybe it might be a different situation that you're not a seafarer, but you're still entitled to certain remedies under maritime law. So it's not a deterrent. It's not the end of the world. It's not discouraging like, oh, well, we can't do anything. You should never be discouraged and just say, oh, we can't do anything. There's always a solution.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that and that you're, letting us know over and over about that, because we hear that often like, oh, well, I don't have a contract. I'm screwed. Like, there's nothing I can do. And that's not true. We do have rights and we just need the proper support to go about it. So how can people work with you? How can people contact you if they have questions, if they want your support?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I think that's how I met you, actually. Mm-hmm. Big fan of LinkedIn. The name of my law firm is Notari Law. And so the website is notarilaw.com. My name is Adria Notari. So it's a unique name. There aren't a lot of Adria Notaris that I know. So I'm pretty easy to find on Google or on LinkedIn as well.
And all the links are down below the video. So you guys can just click away and follow her on LinkedIn. And obviously if you need support, then reach out to Adria. Thank you so much. This has been an eye-opener for me. And I have done a lot of research throughout the years. So if this helped me, I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people out there to get clarity around, maritime law and our legal rights and what we can do about it. Because like you mentioned, we can do something about it. And it is not up to the seafarer to understand the law. That's why we have lawyers.
That's great. That's exactly what we want to hear. No, information is power. So thank you so much for having me.
That's it for this episode. Coming up in part 3, we go even further, breaking down civil versus criminal law, what kind of evidence you need to build a case, how the statute of limitations work, and who's ultimately responsible for the safety of seafarers on board. We also explore why litigation isn't just about justice, but it's about driving real lasting change in the maritime industry. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.
If your brand belongs in the heart of the yachting world, this is where it happens. Yachting International Radio reaches over 1 million yachting professionals and enthusiasts every month, with 77 million impressions, 220,000 social followers, and 74,000 podcast subscribers. Our hosts are insiders, crew, captains, CEOs, trusted voices shaping the industry. This is targeted, high-impact advertising in a luxury niche. Visit yachtinginternationalradio.com/advertise. Your audience is already listening.